On a sweltering hot summer morning, the residents of Fall River, Massachusetts, were preparing for another day of unbearable heat. The unusual heat wave that had descended upon their township had left them with a feeling of dread and oppression. The only escape would be perhaps the town picnic and barbecue planned for later that morning. However, nothing would prepare them for the events that were taking place at 92 2nd Street. Events that would change the entire landscape of Fall River, divide its residents, and cast suspicious glares and whispered accusations upon one and only one of the town's daughters. We are, of course, talking about Lizzie Borden. A 32-year-old unmarried spinster still living with her father and stepmother, who were both now lying butchered inside 92 2nd Street, with only Lizzie and an Irish maid named Bridget present. In the hours that would follow, one of the most enduring mysteries of the 19th century would begin and continue to this day to remain unsolved. At approximately 10 minutes after 11 a.m., Bridget Sullivan, the Borden's maid, known to the family as Maggie, had been lying down in her upstairs bedroom taking a break from window washing and attempting to find some relief from the day's heat, when she heard Lizzie calling to her in a panic. Rushing downstairs, Bridget is informed Mr. Borden has been murdered, and she's directed to not look and instead instructed to fetch Dr. Bowen, who lives directly across the street. When the doctor's wife informs her he's not in, she quickly returns and is given further instructions to call on Alice Russell, a friend and neighbor of the Bordens. It is at this time Mrs. Adelaide Churchill sees Bridget running from the house and inquires of Lizzie if everything is all right, when Lizzie invites her in, telling her, "Do come in, someone has killed Father." Soon, Dr. Bowen does arrive and the police are called. Upon his inspection of Andrew Borden's body, he believes the murder has taken place within the previous half hour. Dr. Bowen asks Lizzie where her sister Emma is. Lizzie tells him her sister is in Fairhaven visiting friends. Dr. Bowen informs Lizzie he'll ask his wife to send a telegram and excuses himself from the house. It is at this time Mrs. Churchill asks about the whereabouts of Lizzie's stepmother, Abby. Lizzie tells her she was out but believes that she thought she heard her return and was probably in her room. Bridget, the maid, protests, explaining that there was no one upstairs, to which Lizzie proclaims that her stepmother must be in the spare room and that Bridget should retrieve her. Being fearful that a killer may still be hiding somewhere in the house, Bridget refuses to go upstairs alone. Accompanied by Mrs. Churchill, the two ladies begin to ascend the stairs when Bridget cries out. From where both she and Mrs. Churchill are standing, they can see a body lying on the floor next to the guest bed. Dr. Bowen returns, finding the distraught women on the landing, and goes to investigate, thus finding the brutally bludgeoned body of Lizzie's stepmother, Abby. This crime has been examined by experts and novices alike for the last 128 years, and the conclusions are all virtually always the same. But it's the path to how investigators arrive at those answers that continues to vary, often in extremes. So how can we satisfy ourselves with a solution that will provide us with an answer that does seem to fit the crime? I think first and foremost, we must rely on facts and not supposition. In order to gain a proper insight to the events that would take place that hot August day, it's important to know who was present and what was their known movements prior to the murders. Let's begin at the start of the day. Present in the Borden household, Andrew Borden, his wife, Abby Borden, daughter Lizzie, the maid, Bridget Sullivan, and Andrew's brother-in-law, John Vinicum Morse, who had spent the previous night staying in the upstairs forward guest room. Bridget serves breakfast for Andrew, Abby, and John Morse. Lizzie does not attend. This would be approximately during the 7 a.m. hour, as immediately after breakfast, Andrew and his brother-in-law, John Morse, move to the sitting room and talk for about an hour. After the conversation, Andrew invites Morse to come back and join them for the noon meal. It's reported that Morse leaves the house about 8:40 a.m. to visit other relatives who live across town. He makes a stop at the post office and then allegedly takes a streetcar with 6 priests on board to his destination. From 9:40 a.m. to 11:20 a.m., he is in the presence of family during the time the murders take place, and thus provides him an airtight alibi. As we continue to focus on Morse, he does return to 92 2nd Street for the lunch date offered by Andrew, but by the time he arrives, police and onlookers are buzzing about the Borden home. Morse then does the most curious thing. He makes no attempt to go inside or speaks to any of the officers as to inquire what's going on. He simply loiters in the backyard and is seen eating pears. The question must be asked, why on earth would he not immediately want to know if his brother-in-law and/or niece Lizzie are all right? Any person with an ounce of common sense would certainly at least ask, what's happened? Did Morse know something was going to happen? He certainly made sure that he was seen at the post office and on the streetcar and in the presence of family during the time of the murders. From what we can tell from records, he never financially benefited from the death of his brother-in-law, Andrew Borden. So the thought that he must have colluded with the killer can be ruled out. Otherwise, wouldn't he have been able to later blackmail the killer? Morse did, however, testify at the inquest, and through court records, we learned that he did enter the house and saw his deceased brother-in-law still lying on the sofa, and only went up the stairs far enough to see Abby's body still lying on the floor. In today's world of CSI, he would not have been allowed back inside the crime scene to move about without supervision, and would have been subjected to hours of questioning. Morse's testimony appears to be direct and without embellishments, very much the type of responses that Lizzie herself would give during her questioning. The subject of John Vinicum Morse is still one of the most puzzling pieces to the Borden murder case. If the Bordens were having breakfast by 7 a.m., it would be easily assumed that Bridget is most likely the first to rise in the Borden household, as it would have been on her to have already prepared food for everyone before they came down from their bedrooms. So, most likely Bridget is up by 6 a.m. We know that both Abby and Andrew had been sick from the mutton and broth that had been served to them for several days running. With no refrigerators available to them, the food would have continued to spoil in the sweltering August heat. In fact, Abby had been tended to by Dr. Bowen the day before the murders as to her sickness. Dr. Bowen surmised that it was food poisoning from the mutton and broth that had obviously gone off. He had followed up with her on the morning of the murders to see if her sickness had subsided. Andrew was angry over his visit and informed Bowen he would not pay for an unsolicited house call, when the reality of it was Bowen was just being a good doctor following up on a patient. After breakfast, Bridget cleans the dishes and Morse and Andrew leave the house. When Bridget is putting the dishes away, she is ordered by Abby to wash all the windows inside and out. Bridget raises a complaint to Abby that she too is feeling ill, most likely from also consuming the mutton and broth, as it is reported that Bridget throws up in the yard while cleaning the windows. Abby, at that time, ascends the stairs, presumably to clean the front guest room Morse occupied the night before. On a side note, interestingly enough, there is no record of John Vinicum Morse being sick from the food, considering he had spent the previous night with them. He would have most certainly dined with the Bordens, and it is reported in his testimony he arrived in time for dinner. Morse admits he did partake of the mutton and broth, so it is interesting that he did not suffer any ill effects. Now, the only ones at 92 2nd Street are Abby, Lizzie, and Bridget. It is reported that through inquest testimony that Bridget went to the cellar to fetch a pail and a brush to clean the windows. Lizzie was at that time ironing handkerchiefs on the dining room table. Bridget begins washing the windows on the outside, starting at the north side of the house. She is asked by Lizzie if she's going to be outside long. Bridget informs her that she will be outside some time, and she can retrieve water from the barn, and that Lizzie can lock the door if she wants. This now leaves Abby and Lizzie alone inside the house. Bridget reports in her testimony that she and Mrs. Kelly's servant girl, a neighbor that shared a fence line, spent some time talking in the yard. There is no actual amount of time given, but eventually Bridget returns inside the house. It is not stated if the door was left unlocked or not, but at the time Andrew came home, Bridget was inside washing the windows. Mr. Borden knocks on the front door as his key will not open it, thus suggesting the side door entrance was locked. Bridget reports she struggled to open the door, caused by a stuck lock. This was probably due to the heat causing the wood in the door to swell. As Bridget struggles with the door, she gave testimony she heard laughter from Lizzie, and it came from up the stairs. With Andrew now home, Lizzie asks him if there is any mail, and he informs her that there is none for her. He asks where is Abby, and this is where the so-called note comes into existence. Lizzie replies she had a note and went out. He asks her, did she say where? And Lizzie tells him someone in town was sick, I think. She then asks him if he'd like to lie down before the noon meal. He agrees after he has read his newspaper. It's at this time Andrew is now alone in the sitting room, and Lizzie returns to the dining room where Bridget is cleaning windows. She informs her there is a cheap sale of dress goods at Sargent's that afternoon. Bridget responds enthusiastically. She plans to have some, but not in the day's heat, and feeling as ill as she does. Lizzie offers her to finish the windows later and rest before the noon meal. Bridget testifies that she went up to her room and lie down on her bed without removing any clothing or shoes. She said she heard the city hall clock strike 11. She said she must have been there 3 or 4 minutes and never went to sleep at all, and the next thing she heard was Lizzie hollering, "Maggie, Maggie." It is at this point where one of the most infamous crimes of the century is born. The situation is suspicious at best, and the answers never truly explaining the events of that morning. Also, interestingly enough, Bridget testified she also never heard or saw the note that allegedly Abby had received, according to Lizzie. By now, the shadow of suspicion remains 100% on Lizzie. However, let's trace her movements before casting accusations. Bridget serves breakfast to Abby, Andrew, and Uncle John during the 7 o'clock hour. Lizzie does not join them. Andrew and John Morse converse in the sitting room until 8:40, at which time Morse leaves by the back side door, locked by Andrew, who invites Morse back for lunch at noon. Soon after, Andrew leaves walking for downtown, presumably by the front door, which he locks with his key. Lizzie is reported to have come down about 9 a.m. It is during this time she begins ironing handkerchiefs and hears Abby tell Bridget to clean the windows. She testifies she last saw Abby going upstairs to change the linen in the guest room and clean it. Asks Bridget if she'll be outside long, leaving her alone in the house with Abby. From here, we have no clear answer as to her movements. From transcripts, she gives a different account to more than one witness as to where she was. Originally, when Mr. Borden comes home, she tells District Attorney Hosea Knowlton she was on the stairs. This is confirmed by Bridget, but Lizzie recants and claims to have been downstairs, possibly in the kitchen. She finally settles on claiming to be downstairs. District Attorney Knowlton asks her how long her father was home before she discovered his body. She testifies she didn't know exactly, as she had to go out to the barn, and that he could not have been home more than 15 or 20 minutes. When further pressed as to why she was in the barn, she testified she needed some lead for a sinker. She was going to Marion on Monday to fish, and she needed a sinker. So according to Lizzie, we are to believe she came down at 9 a.m., did some ironing, and during the time in which Bridget was outside washing the windows and her father gone, we have no record until Andrew comes home. She speaks to him, tells Bridget about the sale, and then, upon learning that she has no intention of leaving, she is excused from work to lie down before lunchtime. During this time, Lizzie is alleged to have gone to the barn to search for the lead for the sinker, eat some pears in the loft, return to the house and find her father dead, and then call to Bridget. From the events we just covered, we see Lizzie had more than enough opportunity to commit both murders, as she was alone with Abby while Bridget was outside washing windows, talking with the neighbor's maid, and in the instance of her father, Bridget was upstairs in her room out of view of the sitting room, but Lizzie claims to have been in the barn. This cannot be confirmed as no one saw her there. There are only two purposes to have claimed to be in the barn at the time of Andrew's murder. One, to allow the actual killer the opportunity to get inside, commit the crime, then leave by the unlocked side door used by Lizzie, who is in the barn. Or two, the barn is her alibi for not being in the house during Andrew's murder. Was Lizzie attempting to suggest that Abby was also murdered during the time she was in the barn? It's been confirmed by Dr. Bowen that Abby had been murdered at least an hour before Andrew. This would mean the killer would have to sneak past Bridget in the yard, get inside a locked house, not be seen by Lizzie, and kill Abby, then hide for about 90 minutes, sneak downstairs, kill Andrew, and slip away and not be seen by Lizzie in the barn, who claimed to be looking out the loft window eating her pears. This has to be the luckiest killer in the history of murder, to go completely undetected, murder in a frenzy, stay calm for 90 minutes, frenzy kill again, and get out without raising any alarm of noise. Is any of this actually possible? For those of you who have seen the 1975 ABC movie of the week, The Legend of Lizzie Borden, starring Elizabeth Montgomery, famously known as Samantha Stevens from the TV show Bewitched, this was a huge departure for the sitcom actress. It's easily one of the best movies of the week ever produced for ABC. The film focuses on the legend and touches on the possibility of incest between Lizzie and her father. If this is indeed factually true, it would lend to the theory of the rage inflicted upon Andrew. In the film, the explanation as to how Lizzie was able to commit the murders was to kill them in the nude. While this is a sensational theory, it is a possibility. However, Lizzie takes a huge risk of being caught by Bridget, and we know that during 1894, women's attire wasn't simply just a pullover dress. There were stockings, petticoats, slips, and girdles to deal with, and the modern-day zipper wasn't invented until 1913. So getting undressed and getting redressed would not be something that could be done quickly. So if she did do it, how was she able to avoid the blood spatter? With Andrew, some have suggested she used his overcoat and put it on like a surgeon's gown, but from the crime scene photo, his jacket seems to be placed underneath the pillow his head is resting on. If she did indeed have the jacket on, then removed it and placed it under his head, there would be most certainly a certain amount of blood on her hands, which she must have anticipated, but easy enough to wash off. Crime scene investigation was still decades away from anything resembling today's procedures. And what about Abby? How was she able to avoid the blood spatter of this scene? Nearly every investigator has come to the conclusion that Abby ran from her attacker to the side of the bed where she was found. The first strike, according to investigators, came at the side of her head just above the ear, causing her to fall face down, and that the killer straddled her body. Once she was down, struck her more than 17 times on the back of her skull. This was, without a doubt, a rage killing, not the murder of a hitman. It's up close and personal. The killer wanted the victim to know they were going to die. So how to not be covered in blood? Did she simply just change dresses? There was more than enough time. Bridget was outside and we know did not open the front door until approximately 10:30 when Andrew returned home. There was at least 40 to 45 minutes from the time of the murder to the time Andrew returned. Plenty of time to change clothes. Bridget never made any type of statement that Lizzie was wearing anything different than when she first came down that morning. That doesn't mean that it wasn't so. It could simply just have never been reported or addressed. There is also the issue of the burning dress. Lizzie, in the presence of her sister Emma and Alice Russell, says, "I think I'll burn this old dress. It has paint on it," and places it inside the fire of the stove. According to reports, Mrs. Russell told Lizzie that was the worst thing she could have ever done and testified to that statement on the stand. Lizzie's lawyer called the dressmaker to the stand, Mary Raymond, who confirmed that the dress was ruined by fresh paint when Lizzie stepped into the hallway of the upstairs where men had just finished painting the railings. Regardless, if she destroyed it on a whim because of paint, or as a clever ruse to have worn it on the day of the murders, or perhaps to have changed into for the murders, no one will ever know the true answer. The fact remains only Lizzie was in the house when Abby was murdered, and no one was downstairs at the time of Andrew's murder except possibly Lizzie. There have been so many theories as to why the Bordens were killed, but why only Abby and Andrew? Why not Lizzie? Why not Bridget? New speculations are that Lizzie and Bridget did it together, that Bridget served as a lookout while Lizzie committed the crime. But as far as we know, Bridget never benefits financially from the murders. From all accounts, she liked the Bordens and was happy working for them. She immediately left the Borden house after the murders and never returned into Lizzie or Emma's lives. There has been a myth that Bridget, upon her deathbed, claimed to have called someone to confess the truth about the Borden murders, but when she began to recover, kept her silence. This cannot be positively corroborated. There is also a theory that Lizzie and Bridget were lovers. Again, there is no proof of such a relationship. If Bridget were that way inclined, and if it were true, then Lizzie would have simply used it as a way to manipulate her into helping her with the promise of money. But when it didn't happen, some believe Bridget would have just blackmailed Lizzie. But in truth, she most certainly couldn't blackmail Lizzie because of the public. Admitting to that type of relationship during 1892 would have brought disgust and anger upon Bridget herself. The only ones who benefited from the deaths of Andrew and Abby were Lizzie and her sister Emma. This leaves us with these questions. If Bridget was in collusion with Lizzie, then she would not have been afraid to go upstairs alone to look for Mrs. Borden. Also, Lizzie would not have attempted to get her to leave the house by telling her about the sale of the fabric, or excusing her to quit cleaning windows and take a rest. Since Abby was already dead and had gone to the front of the house to clean the guest room, there would be no need for Bridget to go there. Lizzie needed to be alone with Andrew in order to kill him. Was Lizzie also prepared to kill Bridget as well if she were caught in the act? I think the answer to that would be yes. Emma Borden is a mysterious figure in this story. She is known from all accounts to be a mild, quiet Christian woman. She never married, and after the murders, moves with Lizzie into a mansion on the hill that Lizzie names Maplecroft. She lives with her sister until Lizzie throws a party for a theater company from New York in honor of the American stage actress Nance O'Neill, who is believed to have had a lesbian relationship with Lizzie. If this is true, it would have most certainly been the last straw for Emma, who departed and never returned to Maplecroft. In the book, Emma, author Frank Sperling spins the theory that the Bordens were murdered by Emma and not Lizzie, that the trip to stay with the Brownells were her alibi, that Emma used a back staircase to slip unnoticed by the Brownells, returned to Fall River, committed the murders, and then snuck back. This has to be one of the most preposterous theories known, when it would have been very simple for the Brownells to testify that Emma was not with them during the times of the murders. Had the murders happened in the dead of night, it might have been a little easier to swallow, but this was during broad daylight. There is the question, did Emma know Lizzie was going to do it and couldn't face being there and therefore went away until the deed was done? Regardless, I personally do not believe Emma was involved in the crime at all. After the murders and the trial, Lizzie and Emma inherited their father's fortune. And while Lizzie had the public on her side during the trial, they seem to have turned on her afterwards, and that Lizzie taking her place on the hill was deeply frowned upon. While Lizzie did have more than enough money to go and live anywhere in the world, why on earth did she stay in Fall River? Is it perhaps just to, in her own mind, take her rightful place in society? Or was it as simple that Fall River was the only home she'd ever known? Shortly after the trial, she changed her name to Lisbeth and even had cards made up. Lisbeth of Maplecroft, a queen in her own castle. Lizzie loved the theater and began traveling to New York to see plays, and there she saw actress Nance O'Neill and became quite enamored of her, striking up a friendship with the actress, throwing parties for her, and sharing a personal correspondence that upon looking closer does seem to carry the theme of a woman who has more than normal affection for another woman. She even at one point buys a home for Nance. However, as time goes by, O'Neill begins to distance herself from Lizzie and is soon gone from her life. The thoughts and theories that Lizzie was indeed a lesbian are given to the ideas that if she were forced into committing incest with her father, this would certainly warp her view on physical intimacy and perhaps create in her a dislike for all men. She was, by all photographic accounts, not an attractive woman. No gentleman callers are ever documented in her life. The facts are that she did not ever marry, and after Emma's departure lived alone in Maplecroft until her death on June 1, 1927, at the age of 67. Ironically, Emma died 9 days after her sister Lizzie. The question upon all of Fall River's residents on August 4, 1892, is the same one that continues to this day. Was she guilty? Or was she simply the scapegoat of an insidious crime? What do you think? Did she do it? The one thing for certain that Lizzie Borden would never escape, besides the question of murder, is a haunting nursery rhyme sung to the tune of Ring Around the Rosie that endures to this day.